Hello, everybody. Welcome to Digital Visibility Strategies. I'm Steve Grenzer, and that's Doc Sheldon over there. And this week, we're going to have a little bit of a conversation about Google's recent helpful content update and some things you can do if you think your website's been affected, or some things you should be doing to your website anyway, even if you don't think it's affected, because having old, stale content on your website's not good for anybody. Um, So just to give a quick little update, um, the helpful content update was relaunched back in September by Google. The idea being that they wanted to crack down on a lot of junk content, um, fake stuff, and just primarily what you want to call like weak third-party content, like guest blogs, which are horrible for the most part. Guest blogging on a good website with a good blog post, awesome. Guest blogging like we usually see from Fiverr, not so much. So, Doc, what kinds of things do you think you've seen or people should be looking out for when they start thinking about content for their website?
Well, this is nothing new that Google is interested in. We've all heard use quality content for several years now. And the HCU update is basically another nail in the board to try to enforce that. So folks that are even leave aside the AI question for the moment. Folks that are just generating crap content just to have a post up, just to hit that one or two posts per week, and it's fluff and it offers no value, or it's basically just reiterating what 13 other pages somewhere say.
Mhm.
That's not useful. Okay. And Google is now enforcing a bit that this is going to have to be useful content, or we're not going to bother to rank it at all. So, the biggest issue is that I see is the fact that this is no longer a page issue. This is now site-wide.
Right.
So if you've got a really nice business website and a blog on that site, and you're generating crap content on the blog, all those great business pages may not even get indexed. Okay, because they're going to put a site-wide classifier on you as not helpful. So you're shooting yourself in the foot there.
Right.
Now, step into the AI question, the folks that are going nuts on using AI to write their content, and they go through it and they say, hey, this is really super, and they publish it. Uh, even, most people really aren't very good editors, okay?
Right.
And it's always been a challenge to edit your own content because you read it the way you thought it, but you're not reading it the way that a third party might read it. So you miss a lot. Some of the nuances get lost, and you may not be putting out, even though you do try to edit it, you may not be putting up as quality a piece of content as you think you are. So a caution there. If you're going to try to use AI content generation and have somebody edit, have somebody else edit it. Somebody who didn't look over your shoulder when you were typing. That is at least a step up. Now, obviously, if you find somebody who's an accomplished editor, you're miles ahead of the pack. But don't just take it off of ChatGPT and publish it because you'll ruin your whole site. You won't ruin just that blog post. You'll kick your whole site to the curb. Okay. There's also a big issue with third-party content on HCU, particularly when, again, if it's just reiterating the same thing that has been said by 30 different people, where's the added value in that? And they used to look at if they had two conflicting sites that were basically saying the same thing, they used to look at the publish date and see which one is most likely the original. Rumor has it that's not necessarily the case anymore. That hasn't been established firmly, but we are seeing some evidence that the last guy, if it was, let's just say, a little bit more artisanal, a little bit better crafting of the language, even though he published it 3 years after the first guy, he may outrank that old guy.
Right. And and
And
and that may
and
be
that's not necessarily
something.
bad.
No, well, and that's where we start looking at things like gain of information. sort
Yeah,
of like gain of function with viruses and stuff that we're doing. If you've got some content out there and you can add to it and make it overall better, I've always thought that was better than writing another short post.
sure.
Instead of having three
And
really short posts, each touching on one little tiny bit, make one really good post that covers more of the topic. Um, and or maybe updates the data for 2024 or 2025 or whatever. Uh, we
and
see,
don't just go in and change the publish date on a
oh,
2-year-old post thinking that
yes,
that's going to fool them because
yeah.
sorry, folks, that ain't going to fly.
You don't think there's a little tiny cell in that table that says date first indexed?
Yeah.
I, I remember when Google first started talking about freshness as being a thing, and all of a sudden people were writing scripts to update the dates on their blog posts every few weeks. It's like,
Yep.
no, that's not quite what they meant.
That's not fresh.
Appreciate the effort. That'd be like me putting a new zip tie on the bag of bread sitting on the counter. Uh, yeah, it's got a new twist tie on it. It must be fresh. That's not how that works. So, the big thing is if you're writing junk content, the odds are you're writing junk content. You're writing content specifically targeting a specific keyword, wrapped in a bunch of gibberish in the hopes that you'll somehow rank better. And we're not going to see like I'm looking forward to the day where Google just finally says your stuff's just not good enough to index.
Yeah.
Right now, people are claiming crawl budget is the problem. No, crawl budget is
Ugh.
not the problem.
If you
Google
got
can
30
crawl.
million pages,
Yeah,
maybe.
yeah. Google can crawl your website just fine. The problem is the quality of the content doesn't meet the threshold of what's already in the index.
Well,
Why?
and that's why I've been kind of encouraged by the fact that recently they are pruning what they will index.
Yes,
And hopefully that's going to get through to everybody that you can't just put garbage up and expect to make it into the SERPs.
right.
I don't care if you're the only vendor for that product. If it's garbage, there'll be no results found on the SERPs.
Yeah, and that's awesome.
Yep.
So, we're not just to give you guys a little bit of advice on what you should be doing if you think you've been affected by the helpful content update, but also what you should be doing with your website on a regular basis anyway. I'm not talking weekly or monthly. I'm talking like every 6 months or so. You should be looking at your website and find out which pages are not performing at all. If they're not performing at all, then they probably need to go for some reason. And this is where signing up for the Google Search Console is probably one of the most important things you can do for your website. And there are a lot of people who have not signed up. It's
Yep.
easy. Google hands you a ton of data that will help you determine what's going on. So what I like to do with websites that look like they're suffering from content issues is we start with Google Search Console and go into the performance area and set the date range to maximum allowed, which is like 18 months. And then what we do is we export that entire performance chart. And what that's going to do is show us a list of all of the pages on your website and which pages have had zero, have had impressions so that they've been seen in search by at least one person, and then how many clicks that those impressions got. And what you're going to find, especially on larger websites and older websites, is that a significant percentage of your pages not only don't get any clicks, they don't even get any impressions anymore.
Yeah.
And that's your starting point. You always go you go to the bottom of the chart in Excel and go, okay, which pages on this list have zero impressions? And then you have to look at them individually and say, okay, was this a good page that somehow got orphaned? Does it just need a couple of links, or is it just crap? Or is it just old, out of date information? I've seen clients, they've got blog posts from 2016 that have no traffic because the page is 7 years old and it provides zero value in the modern internet. So those need to be pruned almost instantly. If it's junk, just straight up junk and has no value, I recommend deleting them and then putting a 410 on it and forget about it. It's gone. It doesn't need to be kept for anything. Um, so if your content is irrelevant to the current content of your website, which happens as people's, e-commerce changes. Maybe you used to do cameras and now you do binoculars or something like that. Or maybe you have a news site that's shifted from political to social to entertainment. You need to start looking at providing Google a specific entity to look at where all the information is the same. It all points in the same direction. When you start spreading out too far, except for maybe a news site, certain types of e-commerce websites, but a lot of people can't justify having a blog post about getting their car fixed on their recipe site. Those are really hard to reconcile. So you should also consider just getting rid of those. And usually you're going to find most of those are guest posts. They're just total junk. And if somebody's offered you a guest post and their website looks like that, you don't want to be there. That doesn't, at the very least, it won't do any good. At the very most, it's going to cause problems down the road.
And I like to jump in there and just
Yeah.
beat a dead horse a little bit. If you've had a product or offering change 3 years ago, if you change your location, if you change a major aspect of your business, particularly,
Mhm.
having a 5-year-old blog post, regardless of how well it performed in 1992, having that old blog post on there has the risk of being less than valuable and consequently poisoning your site-wide
Mhm.
image to Google. Okay. So
Exactly.
that's a very good reason to really consider periodic pruning, because you don't want, even though it's forgotten, even though it never gets any impressions anymore, it's still there and it can drag down your overall reputation with Google as a site,
Right.
not a page.
Right. And so we're also looking at things like, um, maybe the content's not terrible, it's just weak. And we've ran into a lot of that over the last few years where people got into these really short blog posts focusing on a single keyword. And then they do like 18 blog posts on 18 different keywords that are all basically the same thing. And the theory being you didn't want to have a keyword cannibalization has become a huge buzzword where, well, I can't have this blog post mentioning this term because it might suck away from this post. A better solution, and what we try to get clients to do, let's say you have 3 or 4 posts that are relatively weak. You have two options. You can write one new post that's really, really good and redirect the old ones to the new one to push as much whatever link building you've done or whatever you can do to help. Um, the other option would be to actually just update the page. That comes in real handy when you're doing like annual, you know, new thing for 2023 or new data for 2024. Rather than writing a new page every time, you rewrite it, add the new data, and now you have historical data and new data on the same page, and you add an updated for 2024 or whatever to the page and republish it to LinkedIn, republish it to Facebook or whatever. Share it again to get that refresh. So you're constantly getting more and more links to that same page. Uh, for some reason, a lot of people like to just create a new page every year. That used to be a cool thing. I think we're better off going forward, streamlining a lot of that. So, and then the next thing Google has talked about AI and content. And John Mew and a few others from Google have all said, as long as the content's good, they don't care.
Yeah.
And that's fine. And if you have a fair amount of content and you're comfortable with AI, and you're somebody like me, I don't write much. That's just not a skill that I have developed and not something that I enjoy doing. But it's possible to take some things that you have written, upload them to one of the AI tools, and say, I would like an article, and lay out your AI prompt structured in how you want to structure your article in the voice of me, for instance, and let it generate an article for you to at least start with, and use that as your starting point to continue to edit and refine for yourself before publishing it. I don't see the problem with using AI in that way. Um, we know of people who are out there who are generating literally millions of pages of AI content, and we're doing quite well until they got a little vocal about it on Facebook and LinkedIn, and made Google look at them a little closer, uh, because people can't be quiet when they find a trick. Um, but when it comes to original content, we're not talking just text. We're also talking images. We're talking video. Um, Stay away from stock photos. I know everybody uses them, but I know personally, when I see a website and I see the same pictures that I've seen on 8 other websites in that same niche, or even not in that same niche, where I start looking at that and going, okay, these aren't even real photos, which then starts to make me question everything else about that website. Yeah, everybody's got a phone, and the cameras on phones are really good these days. You can go out, and we do this with clients now. I tell them, you give me 4 or 5 pictures a week, every week. I don't care. It takes you 2 minutes to go out there and click, 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 send them to me, and we can go ahead and tweak them in Photoshop if we have to. But having original video, having original photos, this should be normal. And maybe you don't want to take photos. Maybe you need some generic photos. Sites like Canva are designed with AI in mind to help you build your own your own header images, or whatever it is you're going to use, quickly, easily, cheaply. And they're unique. They're not the same thing on every other page. That used to be one of my favorite things to do when looking for product. It's like, here's a picture, and then you submit it to Google, and you see how many hundreds or thousands of websites are using the exact same picture.
Yep.
And now with the new Epic search coming, or actually here, where you can take a photo and circle it, and Google will search for whatever's in that circle, having unique photos is going to be even more important.
Mhm.
Which again takes us back to being helpful, creating good content.
And a footnote to that too, if you're presenting, for instance, data, uh, bear in mind, content refers to basically everything that's on the page.
Mhm.
Images, not so much necessarily. In some instances, yes, but just a picture of your team all hunkered over the conference table, that as content isn't going to do much for you with Google. With users, possibly so.
Mhm.
But if you're presenting data, having an image of especially if it's actually interactive, of a portion of a spreadsheet, a chart, something that presents that data in a different fashion or clarifies it, can be seen as extremely helpful for users and presumably also for Google.
Yeah.
So don't be bashful about taking a different approach. Remember, we've all got different preferred learning methods. Some of us like to hear it, some of us like to read it, some of us have to do it hands-on, some of us enjoy videos, and we absorb things more readily in certain fashions. So if you can put 3 of those fashions on your page, you're going to grab more users with that content. And if it's appropriate, it'll hopefully help you with the search engine as well.
Right. Yep. And I guess the last thing I wanted to bring up about helpful content, outbound links are also helpful, especially if you're writing, white papers, or something more research based, where citing your sources, which used to be the standard on the internet, isn't as common anymore. Uh, I personally hate no follow. I refuse to use it in all but the most extreme cases, simply because for me personally, this is Google forcing webmasters to fill holes for their algorithm that they are unable to fill. I just can't. I spent too much time listening to Google say, build for your users, not for us. And then to have them turn around and go, oh, by the way, do these things just for us that your users will never see. I have an issue with that. But yeah, linking out to resources that are beneficial to your reader is never a bad thing. If you feel like you must put a no follow on it, go ahead. I've seen studies going both directions where people have had no follow on everything and ranked really well, and then no follow on nothing and ranked very well. I think that the links should be there where appropriate, and let Google figure it out. They're big kids. They can, if they don't like it, if they don't like the target, that's fine. Or if they don't think the link has any value, that's fine. That's their prerogative. But other than that, I mean, the helpful content update itself isn't as big a deal for 99% of the websites out there as people are worried about. The people it seems to be hitting the most are the really thin content websites, the niche websites, we build websites for dentists, or we build websites for chiropractors, or we build websites for plumbers. And it's basically the same website with the same content, a handful of different pictures and a different logo on it. That's not helpful to anybody. We're gonna find those having less and less value, which I think is a good thing. These people have been paying good money for what they thought were good websites and free content and all that every month, but they were getting the exact same thing on the other 800 customers that those web developers had or agencies had. So there's no value there. But other than that, it's important to make sure your content's helpful. I don't think that for most websites, it's a deal breaker. And if it is a deal breaker for your website, you probably knew it was coming anyway, right?
Yep.
So with that, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap it for today. Thank everybody for showing up, and we will see you in a couple weeks.
Thanks, everybody.